Let's go back to Tom Kiley in New York. Tom, please deal with all these points.
I'll deal with as many as I can remember, but certainly who flew the airplanes, okay? Well, it is certainly theoretically possible that these al-Qaeda people were recruited believing that they were to hijack an aircraft, maybe not even to crash it, but to hijack one and have it land someplace, whatever. But it is certainly technologically possible to pilot such an aircraft from a remote location, from the ground. That technology has been around since the Second World War in one form or another, and it's much more advanced now. In fact, you could even, I would imagine, place a homing beacon inside the World Trade Center and ensure that despite the fact that these guys didn't have any training, the plane would strike exactly the floor that you wanted it to strike. Okay, that technology has been around all along. Now, if that was employed, that certainly solves the problem that these hijackers were not very good pilots. They didn't have to be pilots. They had to be there to make us believe that this is what happened. But it's also quite possible that there was several operations going on at the same time that could have been insulated from each other. They may have not known anything else about anything coming down, or maybe they didn't even know they were to crash the planes at all. Right? Okay, so that's one thing. The question about bodies, to my knowledge, there have not been any bodies found, but there are certainly contradictions about these bodies. All right? For instance, I'll give you one example. There is an almost total lack of evidence of a jetliner, or an aircraft for that matter, striking the Pentagon. No physical evidence. We're told, because, get this, I hope you're sitting down, that the aircraft, quote-unquote, vaporized on contact. Okay, but the Pentagon also tells us that they were able to collect DNA samples from body parts to confirm that all the passengers were there. Well, how do you have steel and aluminum vaporizing and human flesh not? Okay, for instance. So I don't know that body parts have been found, but I've been told that DNA has been recovered to prove that these people were there. Okay, what else? I mean, again, go to the Internet and search for Operation Northwoods. You will see a U.S. Defense Department top-secret plan that involved a drone-controlled commercial airliner in 1960, and filled, by the way, with people who were in on the plot. Actually, they had two planes in their plan. One took off with people in it, that were actually agents posing as college students, and another drone-controlled, identically marked airliner that took off. These planes were to rendezvous in the sky, and the one with the people was to return to base, disgorge the people, and the drone-controlled one was to be exploded after having flown over Cuba. I am not making this up. This is fact, part of the National Security Archives of the United States. You can see it yourself on the Internet.
Deal with this question of Building 7, if you would.
Sure.
The point that was made that the owner said that he decided to pull it down.
That remark is interpreted, okay, as a slip of the tongue, that he knew that there was going to be a demolition, that the building had been wired for demolition, and he had a Freudian slip and said, we decided to pull it. Pull it is a term in the demolition business, which means we're ready to pull the building down. Okay? He's been challenged on this point, and his response was, no, I did not mean that whatsoever. I meant we should pull the firefighters from the building. You can see him saying this on the YouTube. Okay? But in any case, if the building, let's just say he did want to demolish the building, you can't do that in a matter of hours. It needs to be set up in advance. And by the way, George, on this point, for the first time in history, 3 steel skyscrapers came down due to office fires, or due to office fires in the case of Building 7, due to the fires from the jets. Let me ask you, George, why do we have a demolition industry on Earth when all we need to do is set fires, office fires, in our skyscrapers, and they'll come down perfectly, neatly, at free fall speed, just as if you'd spent millions of dollars and months of time to very, very carefully plan the same event to happen?
Well, these are fair points. Let's take another couple of calls. Here's Steve in Brighton. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, George. Yes, originally I was going to speak to you about the remote control of the aircraft. It's worth noting that amongst the passengers of the hijacked aircraft, well, a considerable number of employees of Raytheon. They were spread around the various aircraft. Raytheon is a company which has a huge amount of expertise in the remote control of airliners in particular.
So what, Raytheon sent a considerable number of their employees to their deaths as part of a conspiracy?
I don't know. But
I'm sorry, please. David in Birmingham. Go ahead, David.
Oh, hi there, George. I'm part of a group of people who've been looking at various different pieces of the evidence. And we've found errors in enough of the information, the actual evidence that was used in Zacharias Moussawi's trial. And I was wondering if you knew for a fact whether or not he was actually trying to, get off of what he was convicted for, because we've found enough problems that should be technically provable in court with the evidence that the CIA used against him. And I was wondering if you knew whether he'd be interested in actually getting off, or if he's some kind of professional patsy for the US government.
Well, let's ask Brendan in North Lanarkshire, then Tom will answer that. Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi there, George. It's slightly different, but it's the exact same theme. But 40 years before John F. Kennedy had actually gave a statement, and it was everything that actually happened on 9/11. And he was talking about the Pentagon when he says it's a system that has conspired vast human material resources into a building of a highly efficient machine. It combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No rumour is printed, no secret is revealed. And that basically tells you everything, what happened.
Well, I don't think it does, but it's an interesting point nonetheless. Tom, give us your thoughts on those calls.
Well, again,
This Ibrahim Moussawi,
I haven't looked into his case specifically. He's purported to be the 20th hijacker, and for some reason he didn't make it on board. But again, if I don't believe the buildings could have come down from being struck by jetliners, and certainly Building 7 wasn't struck by anything. I believe that the buildings could have been were wired to come down, and the jetliners striking them were a pretext that most of us who are uninitiated in engineering could then accept that. I think it was important as a psychological operation by whoever planned it, I'll call them the plotters, okay, that it was necessary for us to see icons of our world crumble before our eyes, okay? And if they just pushed the button and it came down, A, maybe nobody would have been watching and nobody would have had it on videotape. But B, more importantly, it would be clear to everyone that these buildings had been wired in advance, okay, which would then point to a much larger conspiracy. Hence, you need the aircraft striking them. Perhaps another aircraft was supposed to hit Building 7. That's a possibility. Perhaps not all the aircraft even took off that day because they grounded aircraft, okay? And once the plot started happening, aircraft were grounded. There could have been other aircraft involved that were delayed and hence never took off. Maybe Building 7 was wired to be struck by yet another plane. And once there was no plane, the jig was up and they had to get rid of the evidence by pulling the building down. I don't know.
Tom Kiley in New York City, lots of questions and definitely the need for more investigation.